Well, good evening and welcome to tonight's program on ranked choice voting. My name is Lois Taft and I'm on the board of the League of Women Voters of Evanston. For more than 100 years, the League has served as a trusted source of information. The foundation of this trust is that the League is nonpartisan. We neither support or oppose political parties or candidates. The League does, however, take positions on issues, but only after serious study and reaching member consensus on the position. The League of Women Voters of Illinois has taken a position supporting ranked choice voting, but our goal in this program is to present information and answer questions about the issue and encourage voters to make up their own minds. Some technical items. Please put your questions in chat and we'll allow ample time at the end of the program to take your questions. Please stay muted unless called upon, and we suggest that you use speaker view for the program. Before we move into the program, I want to remind everyone that early voting begins October 24th at the permanent polling places in Evanston. And you can find answers to all your questions at illinoisvoterguide.org. Election day is November 8th, and the polls are open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Our presenters tonight are Daniel Biss, Mayor of Evanston, and Alisa Kaplan, the Executive Director of Reform for Illinois. And I'll turn the program over to them.
Well, thank you very much, Lois. Thank you to the League for putting this together. Thanks to the 44 people in the Zoom for joining. I'm always gobsmacked and delighted when 44 people are interested in having a conversation on the technicalities of election administration. But this is an important one, and so I really appreciate your interest and look forward to discussion. The way we decided to do it is I would give an overview of how ranked choice voting works and hand it over to Alisa, who may have some more kind of detailed or perhaps contextual comments that give information from the many jurisdictions across the country that now employ this approach. So let me just get started. One other thing I want to say in kind of explaining my participation this evening is to say that I am simultaneously, I've learned from the lawyers in studying my conduct between now and the election. I've learned that I'm simultaneously two different creatures. I'm Daniel Biss, the mayor of Evanston, and Daniel Biss, the human being. And those two creatures operate under different restrictions. The mayor does not make, may not make, and will not make endorsements or engage in advocacy on a referendum issue, but as a private citizen, I can do so, and I do have opinions about this. So in my opening, I'll just give kind of descriptive background about what this all is and how it works. And I will endeavor to always differentiate. In the event that I'm called upon to express an opinion, I'll be able to do so, but we'll be doing so, and we'll make clear that I'm doing so only in my individual capacity, not in my role as mayor of the city. So with that, let's go. In the election this November, there will be, in addition to the various candidates, there will be for Evanston voters a referendum asking the question of whether we should establish a ranked choice voting system for our municipal elections. Municipal elections in this context means elections for mayor, city council, and city clerk. That will appear on the ballot because the city council passed with an overwhelming majority a resolution directing that it be placed on the ballot, and it's binding. So if it is enacted, then the 2025 municipal election and subsequent municipal elections will be conducted pursuant to a ranked choice voting system. So the question is, or at least the question that many people have at this point, is what is a ranked choice voting system? And so I just want to try to explain that in as straightforward a way as I can. In the election systems that we're used to, what you as a voter are called upon to do is to pick a candidate. You might go into the polling place, and if it's 2000, if it's the year 2000, you're voting for president, you might have to say, I'm for Bush, or I'm for Gore, or I'm for Nader. You just say one of those three names. Well, you write down one of those three names, and then the people who are determining who wins, they count the votes, and they figure out which of those three individuals got the most votes, and that person is the winner. Now, that system is obviously the right system to utilize in a situation where there's two candidates, because you're trying to figure out which candidate is preferred by the electorate. But as soon as you have three or more candidates, things get kind of, I would say, less clear. And the question of what voting system you ought to use really depends upon what you're trying to accomplish. And the system that we currently use can be criticized by some people in certain circumstances. So one reason people might criticize the current system is if you have a bunch of candidates, somebody could win an election. Let's say if there's a 5-candidate field, somebody could win an election with 21% of the vote. That actually, something very similar to that happened for the Republican nomination for governor of Illinois in 2010, when Bill Brady was nominated. And if you become the nominee with, let's say, 21% of the vote, it might be the case that that 21% love you, but the other 79% can't stand you. And then the question is, well, how good a job is that system doing of actually evaluating the broader preferences of the voting public? A ranked choice voting system tries to solve that problem. And it does it by asking something else of the voter. Instead of saying, hey, voter, come into the voting booth and pick Gore, Bush, or Nader, it says, hey, voter, come into the voting booth and rank the candidates for me. You might say, I like Nader the best, but hey, my second choice is Gore and my last choice is Bush. Or you might say, I like Bush the best, but hey, my second choice is Nader and my third choice is Gore, and so forth. And if the majority of the electorate want the same candidate in the first place, it shouldn't matter who people feel like their second favorite candidate is. But in a closely divided election where nobody has a majority, you might then want to ask, hey, what were people's second and third choices? And that's what ranked choice voting does. So to be a little bit more precise about it, what ranked choice voting does is it says, hey, every voter gets to rank the candidates. First, you see who has the most first place votes, who is the candidate preferred by the most voters. And if that candidate is preferred by a majority of the voters, you're done. You're done. That's the winner. You move on. No difference between a ranked choice voting system and a system that we're more used to here in Illinois. But, says the ranked choice voting system, in the event that nobody gets 50% of the vote, you might want to look at the second place choices. And so you say, hey, in that situation, we're going to remove from eligibility the last place candidate, and then say, hey, if you look at that last place candidate, we're no longer counting them as eligible to win. So we might ask the people who voted for them, who are their second choices? And you reallocate those votes to the remaining candidates who are in the race, and then see if somebody has a majority. So to give an example that I think many of us remember very vividly, I don't see in the Zoom anyone who's of a generation where they wouldn't remember this vividly like I do. Maybe Katie, I'm not sure. If you go back to that 2000 election for president in Florida, yes, it is the case that Bush got 537, I think, more votes than Gore, according to the counting system that was eventually mandated by the US Supreme Court. But hey, he didn't get over 50%. Nobody got over 50%. You know, Bush had like 49-ish and Gore had like 49-ish, and then the other folks had, had several percent. And so in that situation, what you would say is, now we eliminate Nader. Let's look at the folks who mark Nader as their first choice. And the folks who mark Nader number 1 and Gore number 2, those votes get reallocated to Gore. And the folks who marked Nader number 1 and Bush number 2, those votes get reallocated to Bush. And then you see, does somebody have over 50%? And in that, the reason I give this example is it would have probably changed the outcome of the election. Most people who preferred Nader did have as their second choice Gore and their third choice Bush. And so in a ranked choice voting system, you would have said, hey, well, Bush and Gore both have pretty close to 50, but they're under 50. So we got to eliminate Nader, reallocate his voters to the candidate they picked for second place. Most of them would have gone to Gore, only a few would have gone to Bush, and the outcome would have shown Gore winning over Bush. Now, I don't give this example as a partisan who happened to strongly prefer Gore in that election, though God knows I did. I give it to say, in a situation where the race is paper thin and neither candidate is at 50%, what the ranked choice voting system offers you to do is to say, for those voters who cast ballots for candidates who don't get a lot of votes, instead of ignoring their preferences, ask who they preferred among the candidates who have a serious shot of getting elected, allocate their votes to their preference, and then count up in that way. And so what you lose by doing that is you no longer are guaranteed that the candidate who got the most votes, the candidate who is the first place choice of the most voters, becomes the winner of the election. On the other hand, you're guaranteeing that whoever gets picked is the preference compared to the other options of the majority of the voters. And so that's how the ranked choice voting system works. I give the 2000 election in Florida also because it's a kind of unusual example of an election whose outcome would have been changed in a ranked choice voting system. In many elections, the outcome would be the same regardless. But for these edge cases, elections that are relatively close and elections where the second choice preferences of the candidates who didn't get a lot of votes could swing the outcome, a ranked choice voting system allows the tabulation mechanism to do just that. So that's how it works. And let me then kick it over to Alisa, who I'm sure has lots of content that she'd want to add to my summary.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alisa Kaplan. I'm the Executive Director of Reform for Illinois. I'm also a longtime Evanstonian and a board member of the League of Women Voters of Evanston. So I'm particularly glad to be here and to see everyone here. As Daniel said, this is an important issue, and we appreciate you all taking time out of your evening to spend it educating yourself about the technical points of ranked choice voting. I do think people sometimes get bogged down in the technical points when they need not. This is really, from a voter's perspective, rather simple. We're all familiar with the idea of ranking things, right? There's top 10 lists for songs, or nowadays for pretty much everything. You have your top 5 favorite movies or shows. You have probably your top, I don't know, I think for me, like maybe top 3 ice cream flavors that you like. I think this is a concept that's pretty familiar to most people. And so the way I like to look at this at its simplest is, let's say you go to an ice cream store and your favorite flavor is chocolate and they're out of chocolate. Well, under the current system, you would just have to leave because, you're done. You only get one bite at the apple. But with ranked choice voting, you can say, okay, you don't have chocolate. What about strawberry? Do you have strawberry? And if they have strawberry, then you're in luck. It may not be your first choice, but it's second best. If they don't have strawberry, you can ask if they have vanilla, and so on and so forth. And so with ranked choice voting, where it's really powerful, is that you get a much greater chance of having a say in the final outcome of an election than you do when you only get that one choice. So, like Daniel said, if you could only vote for Nader, then you don't have a say if Nader gets eliminated, right away. You don't have a say in that outcome. But if you get to vote for Nader and for Gore, then, which again, we're assuming that's the way it would go, then you have a much greater chance of influencing the ultimate election outcome. And from our perspective, that's a powerful thing. That really elevates your voice in the democratic process. The fact that you have more chances to influence the ultimate election outcome. So I want to tie this conversation back to one of the audience questions that we got, which was, I don't have it in front of me, but basically it was, what problem is this trying to solve in Evanston? First of all, I don't want to necessarily say that there is a problem in Evanston, nor do I think we necessarily have to. But I do think there are areas where our process can be improved and where our democracy can be strengthened. And I think that we've all experienced some relatively rough primaries with some divisive rhetoric. And also, as much as we like to pride ourselves on our civic engagement, we've had pretty abysmally low turnout in our primaries, about 20% for the last 2 municipal elections. So I want you to keep those things in mind and the other things we've talked about as I talk about how I see the benefits of ranked choice voting and how they can benefit, how it could benefit Evanston. So I like to divide the benefits into 3 categories: the benefit to the voter, the benefit to the candidates or potential candidates, and the benefit to the system, right, and to your political system. So for the voter, we talked about some of the benefits. You get more choice. You can really vote with your heart instead of trying to vote strategically. If you have, you don't have to say, look, I really like Nader. I like what he stood for, but everyone says he doesn't have a chance, and I kind of agree that he doesn't have a chance, and I don't want him to become a spoiler candidate and end up electing Bush, so I'm not going to vote for Nader. And so you're not allowed to express that preference that Nader was really the candidate you wanted without at least risking ending up with a result that you really don't want, right? This would eliminate that possibility. So you get to vote. You don't have to think, I have to vote for the most electable or the lesser of 2 evil most electables. You can vote for the person that you want to vote for, and then you can vote, maybe you save your most electable choice for the second or third, for your second or third places. So you get that ability to influence the outcome, that self-expression. For candidates and potential candidates, people who think that they might want to run. Oh, let me back up and add one more benefit for a voter. The way ranked choice voting would be implemented in Evanston, it would eliminate our primary. So we wouldn't have 2 elections. We'd only have 1 because it's an instant runoff, right? You don't need to have a runoff because all of that is done in the tabulation. So as a voter, you don't have to go to the polls twice. You only have to go once. And that has systemic benefits that we'll talk about down the line. So then for candidates or potential candidates, I've met candidates who say, I would have run, or when I was running, I talked to people who said, I would really love to vote for you, but I don't think you have a chance. You're not supported by the powers that be. You don't have enough money. You don't look right. You don't think right. You don't think the way I think, the majority is gonna think. And so I'm not gonna risk wasting my vote on you. And so that might dissuade a candidate from running, and it might, because it will dissuade voters from voting for somebody like that who may be a little beyond the conventional wisdom, that candidate might not have the chance that they would otherwise. And what we've seen, and there's good data to show this, is that ranked choice voting has real benefits for what I'll call kind of non-traditional candidates, or candidates who don't necessarily have the profile of the most obviously electable candidate. We've seen women candidates benefit from ranked choice voting. We've seen people of color benefit from ranked choice voting. So that ability for people to speak their mind also benefits candidates and gives voters then a wider choice of who to vote for. And then the systemic benefits. Because we have all this more information about what people actually want, and we have more choices, we have the ability, we have a greater chance for the system to actually reflect the needs and the values of the community that it's supposed to serve, right? You have more information, you have more candidates who are running, you'll get a closer fit between what people actually want and what officials get elected and how they work together. And one thing that we also have really good data on is that ranked choice voting encourages civility in campaigning. And the reason for that is that candidates can't just win with a narrow base of support, right? The most narrow base of support. They can't just win with, 21% of the vote and everybody else gets, in the teens or whatever in a multi-candidate field. They have to appeal to a broad group of people. And they have to, they want to appeal to people who might have someone else for their first choice, but might vote for you for second choice. So they're less likely to attack other candidates because they want to get the second choice votes of those candidates, of those voters who support, their opponents. So those are some of the benefits that we get for voters, for candidates, and for the system that I think would be beneficial for Evanston.
And while we're waiting for questions to come in, let me just piggyback on that last part. And here I am speaking in my personal capacity about my opinion about this. And this is really specific to Evanston. I think ranked choice voting is a great idea in general. I've been really excited to see the effect it's had on communities across the country that have implemented it. But now I'm thinking specifically about what I believe our needs are here in Evanston. And it seems to me that we have a situation on our city council that's reflective of our community, which is a billion different ideas, and people want to run in a million different directions. And that can be invigorating and exciting and beneficial if it can be channeled, if there can be enough cohesion and enough collaboration to push it in a consistent direction. If that doesn't happen, then you wind up making no progress at all because everyone's running at an equal velocity in opposite directions at the same time. And so I think our success, especially in a community like Evanston, really, really relies on our ability to work together, our ability to collaborate in establishing shared priorities. And a ranked choice voting system really selects for people who are good at that. Because as Alisa just indicated, you're not just trying to get people to vote for you. You're trying to get people who like somebody else to be willing to live with you. You're putting forth a political persona of, I can work with a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. And I think that solves for a really critical challenge that we tend to experience here in Evanston. And so I think that I think it could be very, very beneficial as we try to design a system that simultaneously reflects and respects our activists kind of ambitious, let's try a bunch of stuff culture, and also wants to get things done and keep on task.
There are some technical questions that are being addressed by nice people, nice audience members who are also experts.
Right, so Gina has asked like a mathematician's question, which is, if you get to pick how many candidates you rank if you're a voter in a ranked choice system. You can pick one, or you can rank them all, or you can rank 2, 3, 3 out of 7 or whatever else. So Gina asks, well, should you rank your last candidate or leave them off? And the answer there is they're really indistinguishable. Those are indistinguishable ballots. But if there's 7 candidates, ranking your favorite 5 is different than ranking your favorite 4 is different than ranking your favorite 3. But ranking your favorite 6 versus ranking all of them turns out to mean the exact same thing.
Lois, you asked how often does RCV actually change the outcome of an election? And the answer is Well, obviously it depends. In New York, it only changed a handful out of the, several dozen elections that were going on. And when I say change the outcome, I mean that, the person who didn't win a majority of first choice, the person who won the most first choice votes didn't end up winning after ranked choice voting tabulation. But you can't really necessarily talk about the impact of a different system just by looking at the number of races where somebody who would have won under the first system didn't win under the second system, or vice versa, because you have to look at the whole context that we were talking about and how it will change how people campaign, who runs for office to begin with, and things like that. So candidates learn how to optimize the system that they're forced to live with, right? The game that they're supposed to play. And so ranked choice voting sets up a different set of rules. So it's not necessarily just about how many races the outcome will change, but also the impact on the system in general.
Let me just jump in here, because I detected a whiff of a palogium in Alisa's answer. I don't think I would argue we don't want to change to a system that has a different outcome most of the time. Right? Like we don't want, most elections are clearly decided, and you wouldn't want to tweak to the counting system to cause the other outcome. The point of ranked choice voting is that for the minority of elections that are very close, there's a decent chance that it'll result in a different outcome. And for the elections that are not very close, you would almost certainly expect it to wind up with the same outcome. And that's I think what you would hope for from a reform that's measured and reasonable.
Lois asks, given that the consolidated elections are run by the county, what communication has there been with the Cook County Clerk's office about logistics, such as equipment, staff training, et cetera? We did talk to the clerk's office. They said that, of course, they're aware of ranked choice voting, and they've been talking about it and the possibility that they will have to implement it. I think, some of this we're going to have to, the city will have to work with the clerk's office, but it's their job to implement this if it's what Evanston says it wants. And so it's going to be up to them. There will be some cost in new software, licensing software, and training some staff, et cetera. But then they'll save down the line on not having to administer a primary for us. So, that'll help balance things out. I think it's also worth pointing out that there are several other jurisdictions that are looking in Cook County that are looking at ranked choice voting, including Berwyn, which passed a kind of advisory referendum that was overwhelmingly passed in support of ranked choice voting, kind of a symbolic vote. And there's a movement in Oak Park as well to put it on the ballot. So as other communities consider this, Cook County, it will really be incumbent on Cook County to get working on implementing it. I'll also say that this is how it's usually done. In most cases, towns that do not, or in many cases at least, towns do not administer their own elections. So it's usually some bigger entity like the county or the state. So it's not surprising that this is the way it works, and it's not some kind of unique difficulty to Evanston.
And I don't know if folks are reading the chat. I mean, Larry's doing a great job of answering some questions. Do we want to kind of summarize those answers verbally for folks who may not be reading? I'm getting a nod from Lois. I mean, one question is what does this do to voter turnout? And I think it's fair to say that the jury is still out, in the sense that there isn't that much data, but the data there is positive. The great majority of academic assessments have indicated that voter turnout has increased by ranked choice voting. And to sort of meander into another question, if you were to just kind of ask yourself to give a naive answer, you might say, well, one reason why ranked choice voting might decrease turnout is because it's confusing. And one reason why ranked choice voting might increase turnout is voters get to express more choices. There's a lot more reasons to vote, even in a situation where you, for example, may not think that your preferred candidate has a very good chance of winning the election. And the good news from a ranked choice voting advocate's perspective is that that first problem is solvable. To the extent that confusion is an issue, you have time to educate the electorate about it and dispel that confusion. But the benefits that might be expected to increase turnout are durable and would last as long as you have ranked choice voting in effect.
Those are great points. I just want to add that because we're getting rid of our primary, there is an almost automatic, or we can almost assume that there are going to be benefits in the number of people who participate in the process. Because again, our primary currently is very low. Last couple elections, it was about 20%. In 2017, turnout almost doubled between the primary and the general election. So if we had just had the general election, it's reasonably safe to say that many more people would have had their voice in throughout the process, rather than having a very small slice of the electorate pare down the number of candidates to just two and kind of hand those scraps to the greater portion of the electorate to decide. So so whatever, you know, we can say about what turnout would do from election to election, eliminating that primary will almost certainly have turnout benefits. Alisa suggested RTV encourages civility in campaigns. Is there any evidence for this? There actually is, and researchers have done some really interesting studies that look at campaign rhetoric and code words as negative or positive, et cetera, and have found that it does encourage positive campaign rhetoric, obviously not in every case, but overall. And they've also asked voters, done some survey data, and found that voters often perceive ranked choice campaigns as more positive than just plurality or conventional campaigns.
Beverly asked, I think, a really important question, following up on the question about, you know, the county administering this. So I just want to be clear that the city has the right to do this. We don't need the county to sign off. This is something that comes with what's called home rule authority, which is a power that the city of Evanston, as well as Oak Park and Berwyn and most others have. And basically, we can set up our election system, and the county clerk's job is to administer it. And so if this passes, the county clerk will be required to administer an election system where, when people show up to vote in Evanston, they will have the opportunity to rank their candidates for Evanston municipal offices, but not for other offices. So they'll show up on election day, and they'll be choosing between, you know, let's say Lois and Alisa and Betty for mayor of Evanston in 2025, and they'll be able to rank those three candidates for mayor of 2025. I love all of you, so I'm not going to personally weigh in. But then for other offices like school board, there will not be a ranked choice ballot, and they'll be, you know, they'll be the same ballot, but different voting systems for different offices. And that's just the Cook County Clerk's job to produce. And it sounds a little complicated, but that's the very thing that happens across the country when this situation arises, as is quite common by now.
Yeah, Jane brings yeah, I was going to say in response to Daniel mentioning confusion, because that is a critique that comes up often about ranked choice voting. People say, well, is it just too confusing, or is it too confusing for certain groups of voters? Overall, the data do not show that. Overall, exit polls in New York City and other places where ranked choice voting has been implemented show that upwards of 90%, usually between 85 and 95% of people say that they found their ballot easy to complete. And there's been little variation between ethnic groups, et cetera, on that question. So overall, people understand it. I do think that education is a part of that. And that's one of the reasons that, you know, it's great that we have some time to get the word out about how it works. But that's not been a big issue in the places where it's been properly implemented. There's also actually some really interesting recent data that shows that ranked choice voting decreases certain types of errors, often the most serious errors that get your ballots thrown out, because people are more likely to vote for at least one person rather than just leaving their vote blank with a ranked choice ballot. And so these studies show that actually that has reduced discrepancies in voter error between different groups. So actually better, even with a more complicated ballot, fewer ballots may get thrown out.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow up, and again, this is colloquial, this is not a research paper, but I know a lot of people, and I bet most of you do too, who either don't vote or vote reluctantly because they believe that their values are not well reflected by, let's say, either the two major parties or the options available to them, or they think the person they believe in doesn't have a chance, right? I hear that a lot in life, and I'm guessing many of you do too. Anybody who's not voting for that reason is much likelier to want to vote with a ranked choice system. And so I think that's a really important point, that anybody who feels disenfranchised by the two-party system or disenfranchised by the kind of candidates who are traditionally available and supported by the powers that be is going to be much likelier to want to vote in a system where you have ranked choice voting.
These are great questions so far.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through to the chat there just to make sure
Same.
we're not missing any. And if any of the moderators want to jump in, if we are missing anything, please let us know.
I do want to say also that this isn't a totally untried and crazy thing that has dropped from the sky. Ranked choice voting has been in use in certain jurisdictions for many decades. It's used in some form or another in countries like Australia, Ireland, New Zealand, and it's being used currently in about more than 20 counties and cities around the country, and it's about to be used in more than 50 more. So it's an idea that's been around. We've had some time to look at it and see how it works, but it has been gaining momentum in recent years because of what people see as the benefits. And some of the places that have it, San Francisco, Oakland, a lot of several other Bay Area cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, several other towns in Minneapolis. Cambridge, Massachusetts has been doing multi-member ranked choice voting for, I believe since the 40s. New York City just had its first ranked choice voting election in its primaries last year, elected one of its most diverse city council in history, its second Black mayor, and had the highest turnout in decades. I'm trying to think where else, but those are some of the places that it's been used. It's now used in federal elections in Maine. In Alaska, you might have heard, it was just used to elect the first Native American congresswoman from Alaska. So we would be the first jurisdiction in Illinois to use it, but we would not be the first jurisdiction in the world or the country.
To Lois's question, does ranked choice voting delay the reporting of the election results? The simple answer here is yes. The kind of reallocation process might not be able to start until all the mail ballots trickle in and all that stuff. And so there's a greater chance that you're not going to really know the outcome for a few days than without the ranked choice voting system. As a candidate for political office, I would say that's pretty hard on our families, but I'm not sure that with that exception, I'm not sure how much of a serious, I'm not sure how seriously we should weigh that, but it is certainly a reality that there's a better chance you wouldn't know the outcome for a little while.
at least you don't have to go through both, suffer through both a primary result and a general election result. Although you didn't have to do that either, but not everybody can be so special because Daniel won with a majority, and so he didn't have to go to a runoff.
I mean, as an aside, I'll say the current system in Evanston is truly complicated. And, I think if we were to quiz even members of city council about what circumstances trigger a runoff in elections for city council, what circumstances trigger a runoff in an election for mayor, I think people would, not everyone will get it right, because it's just, the current system is quite confusing. And I think simplifying it, period, would be a good thing.
Gina asked, how does ranked choice voting impact voters' trust in the election? It's well liked by voters. Let me just start with that. Overall, majorities of voters, once they use it, tend to really like it. If you're talking about, because I have heard sort of a theoretical criticism that maybe because it's a complicated tabulation process, people might not trust the results. I personally haven't seen any data indicating that that's the case. If it's out there, I haven't seen it. So as far as I know, it hasn't had that impact, at least in a significant enough way that that it's been discussed. I have seen it, like I said, as a theoretical possibility, but not as a reality.
So I was just asked to kind of walk through something that was in the chat. So I'm going to do something really stupid, really risky, and we're all going to look back on the day that Daniel did this really dumb thing. I can't do it because screen sharing has been disabled. Does the host want to be a enabler of my poor decision making and allow me to share my screen for a sec?
You are able to do that now.
Okay, well, here we are. Okay, can you all see my blank sheet of paper?
Yes.
So here's the question that was asked in the chat. If candidate A gets 18 votes and candidate B gets 16 votes and candidate C gets 10 votes, then what happens next? So you look at this score and in traditional voting, candidate A just wins because they got the most votes. But in ranked choice voting, you say, well, hey, hold on, does anybody get a majority? Well, you got to add all those numbers together. 18 plus 16 plus 10 is 44. The majority of 44 is 23. Nobody got that. Okay, nobody got 50%. So we gotta now do our ranked choice voting thing. Now, what our ranked choice voting thing tells us to do is it says, who's in last place? That's candidate C. Well, so now candidate C is eliminated from the process. I'm not going to try to figure out how to do a strike through, but that would be kind of cool. Candidate C is eliminated from the process. We all know that people are eliminated when they become italicized. And so their 10 votes can be reallocated, but to figure out how to reallocate them, we've got to look at them, right? All those 10 candidate C votes were folks who walked into the voting booth and marked down candidate C as their first choice. What we don't know is what did they say for their second choice? Well, there's three things they might have done. They might have said their first choice was C and their second choice was A. They might have said their first choice was C and their second choice was B. Or they might have said their first choice was C and they're C or bust candidates and they have no second choice. So those 10 votes, they were all either CA votes or CB votes or just C or bust votes. And we're going to call those CAs, CBs, or Cs. So now you got to figure out how many of each of those votes there are. So there's some number of CAs, some number of CBs, some number of Cs. All we know is those three numbers add up to 10. Well, suppose that of the folks who marked C first, only 2 of them marked A second. But of the folks who marked C first, suppose 5 of them marked A second. And that means that the folks who marked C first, 3 of them loved C so much they didn't even bother to mark down a second choice. They checked off candidate C. They marched out of the voting booth. As soon as they were 100 feet away from the building, they put their C sticker back on and they put on their C pullover and walked over to their C campaign rally. So now of those 10 votes, 3 of them, the 3 that marked only C, are what's called spoiled ballots because they can't be reallocated to anybody else because those folks didn't mark a second place choice. But for the CAs, they now get reallocated to A, which means A now has not 18 votes, but 20 because A has 18 votes from before plus 2 new votes. And B has now not 16 votes, but 21. And C is of course eliminated from contention, as you can tell by the fact that C is written in italics, the universal symbol of elimination. And so now that we've conducted this reallocation, we looked at those 10 votes that were given to C, we figured out 5 of them should be reallocated to B because those 5 voters preferred candidate B. 2 should be reallocated to A because those candidates preferred candidate A as their second choice. 3 should be thrown out because those candidates only wanted to vote for C and nobody else. And now, lo and behold, candidate B has 21 votes, candidate A has 20, so 21 is a majority of the remaining votes, and candidate B is elected. So in this system, when we saw that candidate A narrowly came in first, but was under half, we then figured out what the preference of candidate C's voters were between candidates A and B. And once we factor that in, we saw that candidate B came out ahead of candidate A and is elected. Oh, sorry, I am being, yikes, I have misspoken. And I am being told that. Those are not spoiled ballots, they're exhausted ballots. So a spoiled ballot is a ballot where you messed up somehow. And in fact, if that gets caught before the polls close, you can fix it and correct your vote. An exhausted ballot is a perfectly legitimate ballot that is counted, but it no longer is able to express a preference. So if you're, for the folks who were C or bust and voted for candidate C only and did not mark a second choice, once candidate C has been eliminated from the tabulation process, those ballots are exhausted and therefore are no longer able to count. And so that, I think that's an important point though. There's 2 kinds of folks who voted for candidate C. There's the folks who just wanted to vote for candidate C and go home and that's fine. And there's also the folks who had a strong preference between candidate A and candidate B, and that's also fine. And then the point of a ranked choice voting system is that preference actually counts toward the process of determining who then serves in public office. Oh, so Lisa writes, but B didn't get a majority of 23. So this is where and so this is somehow become a math class, I apologize. This is where the exhaustion issue is really, really, really critical. At any stage, you stop if somebody has a majority of the non-exhausted ballots. If among the ballots that are still awake, somebody has a majority, you quit. So in the beginning, when there's 18 for A, 16 for B, and 10 for C for a total of 44, a majority is 23. And you would stop if somebody has 23. Hey, nobody does, so you keep going. You reallocate C's ballots. In the reallocation process, 3 were exhausted and get put to the side. There's 41 remaining unexhausted ballots. And so you stop if someone has a majority of 41, which 21 is. Now, of course, if there's 2 candidates left, certainly one has a majority unless there's a tie, God help us all, which is not a problem that ranked choice voting solves. But in general, you might not get to 2 candidates. You might start with 7 candidates, not have a majority, reallocate once, have 6 candidates left, not have a majority, reallocate once more, have 5 candidates left, have a majority, and call it a day. So there's no guarantee of when the reallocation process will terminate. I think the answer to Kelly's question is, yeah, usually the whole thing is published. It's completely transparent. Is that right, Alisa?
Yeah, usually.
So
And
that, by the way, that's why we can say definitively whether ranked choice voting changes the outcome, because they do publish, hey, here was the first tabulation, here was the second tabulation, here's the third tabulation, and so forth. So you can actually go and check which candidate had the most votes in the first tabulation, and then if you know if that's the person who was ultimately elected or not.
I also want to say it's great to see Daniel geek out, but if your eyes glazed over during that presentation, for me personally, what's important to me is that I can express my voice and my opinions about what I want out of my elected officials, and this gives me a greater ability to do that, and that I've seen the benefits and how they play out when this is used. So I don't want people to get tripped up by the technicalities, although I think it's important to have a basic understanding of how it works. And I don't think you have to be able to, solve the math problem in order to support ranked choice voting.
And critically, the expectation of the voter is to rank their choices, not to do the back end math.
Right.
So when people say it's too confusing for the voter, they don't mean all this back end math is too confusing, which may well be true for some voters. What they mean is just ranking your candidates is too confusing, and that's the assertion that feels a little questionable to me.
I want to address one other thing that's come up a lot. There's an idea out there that ranked choice voting will produce a certain type of candidate. And we've talked a little bit about this, but I mean like a certain type of candidate on the ideological spectrum, like a moderate candidate, for example, is something you hear a lot. I want to emphasize that ranked choice voting selects whatever the majority of the electorate wants. If the majority of the electorate wants a really progressive candidate, then that's what you're going to get from ranked choice voting. What you're not going to get is these sort of paradoxical results where, for example, let's say you have 4 progressive candidates and 1 not so progressive candidate, and the 4 progressive candidates split up the progressive vote, and then the not so progressive candidate wins. I saw this recently in a Florida town that's 2/3 Republican and ended up with a Democratic mayor in a 3-way race because the Republicans split their vote. So that's not what you're going to get. So again, this is about, and maybe you're more likely, again, to get consensus builders when you're getting people who are trying to appeal for trying to get second place votes, or trying to appeal to that majority, that broad majority, instead of just that like 21% you need to win in, in a 5-person field. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna get what the will of the people is, not an ideological, anything. So it's just about being more democratic.
With a lowercase d.
Yes, with a lowercase d.
Well, you've done a great job of answering all the questions. And I think maybe if that's all the questions, do you have anything you'd like to close with, presenters?
I just want to reemphasize what Alisa said. I think it's this is a situation where the trees are really fun to look at, but also it's sometimes important to remember the forest. That the kind of understanding how this all works under the hood is really valuable. But the question confronting voters in Evanston in November isn't going to be a quiz on the details of how it works. It's really a question of whether the principles and approach and values represented by this style of election are reflective of how they want to have their elections run. And I think particularly, whether you're campaigning for one side or the other, or just kind of educating your neighbors, I think keeping the conversation focused on what is the point of the system, what are the benefits and drawbacks, and away from the kind of complex mechanics of it, I think is probably the best way to go, which is as much of a do as I say, not as I do admonition as has ever been made. But I'll try to do as I say next time.
And I just want to add that if you like this idea, first of all, continue to educate yourselves. You're welcome to reach out to me or to the folks at Fair Vote who have been helping with this. I'm putting my email address in the chat. If you have any questions, you can let us know. If you do want to support this, there's lots of ways you can do that. We're always looking for volunteers for phone banking or canvassing. You can get a yard sign is a great way to express your support. There's even, if maybe Larry wants to post it, a way to donate. So, get informed, spread the word. That's really super important. We rely on people like you who have had the time and the wherewithal to educate yourselves on this, to get the word out about it. That's really the main challenge. Our experience has been that most people, once they know what ranked choice voting is, they think it's a common sense idea and that it just makes sense and they want to do it. But we need to get the word out about it in order to actually make it happen. So I hope you can help us do that and reach out if there's any way we can help you do that.
Well, thank you very much to Daniel and to Alisa and to everyone who participated in today's program.
Thank you so much. This was great.